Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Seth Joyner Show. It is Talk to Him Tuesday. We have the giveaway working today. I'll get more into that a little later on, but so much going on in the world of football. We are literally 6 days away from the NFL draft. Next Thursday, the 29th, we get the first round. And the subsequent days we'll get rounds 2 through 7, I should say. Looking forward to that. As you guys know from the promo, today is Talk to Him Tuesday. We're talking everything from the Eagles to the entire NFL and what's going on, from quarterbacks to potential draft picks and where guys are going to fall. What do the Philadelphia Eagles do at number 6? So much to get to, so much to talk about. What's going to make this show fly today is you guys' questions, because it's pure Q&A. I'm taking your questions, the things that you want to talk about, the things that you want to chat about. So let's get it going. Sean Brown checks in with the first question of the day. I'm sorry. There we go. Sean Brown, what do you think of the Eagles signing Harris? Well, I mean, honestly, the Eagles have some safety issues. So any kind of improvement that we can get from that standpoint is going to be a plus. We're not sure when Rodney McLeod is going to be back 100%. Obviously, we lose Jalen Mills, who was pretty much a versatile player in the secondary for the Philadelphia Eagles, being able to play the corner, being able to play the safety slot, and then from time to time being able to drop down in the slot and play coverage there. So any kind of upgrade on the defensive side of the ball, particularly in the secondary, is a big plus. I saw all week long that we were making a huge push to get Adoree Jackson, but he signs a 3-year, $39 million deal with the New York Giants. I think that was just a little too expensive for the Philadelphia Eagles, and too expensive, in my opinion, for the performance that he's put forth over the last few years. But now that we've met the burden of getting under the cap for the new fiscal year 2021, on last week, we can now turn our focus to trying to figure out what guys we can bring in, what the Eagles can afford, and what they can afford. And I guess, the biggest question of the day comes from Julie Herzog. She wants to know, what about the quarterback signing? That quarterback signing would be one Joe Flacco, formerly of the Super Bowl champion Baltimore Ravens. In my opinion, I think it's a good sign. It's a good sign because it's only going to cost the Eagles, in base salary, not projecting incentives if he gets to play. I think if, he winds up playing, if Jalen Hurts struggles and they have to make that change, he has the opportunity to bump that salary up to 7.5. But I think 3.5 million, that's a good sign. When he had to play last year in spot duty, I thought he played, okay. Listen, we all know that he's not the most mobile quarterback. The optimal situation would be for the Jalen Hurts to take the reins, play well, and then, if there's an injury somewhere along the way, we've got a backup plan. I always thought that if you want to go this route, that at some point in time, the Eagles would have to, in my opinion, sign a veteran quarterback. They have that. They have the mentor now for Jalen Hurts. They have the insurance policy if Jalen Hurts winds up getting injured. So, listen, I think it's a good move. Time will tell. Hopefully we won't need him this year. Hopefully he'll just be there in a mentorship role for 1 year. But like I said before, I just think that is a pretty good indication of, where things are and where things are heading. Let's go. Where's my man Lawrence Melton? There you go. Lawrence wants to know, do you like any of the current available outside cornerbacks I know Pittsburgh just released Nelson. Listen, we are locked down, on one side with Darius Slay, I should say. And I think that, last year was a tough year for him, particularly the games against, the top tier wide receivers and not being able to get any improvement and any help from the defensive scheme. You leave him out there on DK Metcalf, he struggled. I believe it was Avonte Maddox he struggled mightily against. And I get the understanding, I get the thought that, hey, when you sign top tier cornerback, your belief is that guy can be a shutdown corner. You can lock down that side of the field. But as the game progressed, I think we all saw that, hey, he needed some help. He needed help in the worst way. And Jim Schwartz just wasn't able to provide that help. There's a lot of questions on the other side. Now with Jalen Mills gone, that insurance policy is no longer there. Do some of us believe that Avonte Maddox can be that guy? I think if they put him outside and they leave him there and allow him to work his technique on the outside and allow him to improve at that one position instead of moving him into the slot and then out of the slot and into the slot and out of the slot, that I thought that, in 2019, that he was the best cornerback that we had on the football team. But when you have a young guy like that, it's not in his best interest, to be moving him as much as they moved him around. So, I would imagine that the Eagles are just waiting for, the price to be right on some of these quarterbacks, Lawrence, that are out there. And hopefully, they will make a move. Seeing another interesting one here. Nobody wants to, some of you guys just don't want to let Carson Wentz go ahead on to Indianapolis and call it a day. Marquise George wants to know my takeaways on the Carson Wentz interview. Well, I think some of you guys who follow me on social media probably saw my comments as it pertains to Carson. Listen, I hope that, I wish the best for the guy. I hope that, he does well there. There's some things that continue to struggle, that some things that continue to trouble me, I should say. The question was asked, and some people will say that they don't care that, he's no longer an Eagle, so why are we continuing to talk about it? Because these are questions that loom large. And a lot of people argue the fact that, he never said that he didn't want to be here. He never publicly said that he didn't want to be a Philadelphia Eagle. He never said basically that he wanted to be the starter, and if he wasn't the starter, that he was out. Well, I think a lot of those questions were answered because Carson was asked on multiple times, did you ask for a trade? And his response was, hey, I don't really want to get into all of that. That comment right there told me all I needed to know. He asked for the trade. He felt slighted that the Eagles even made the draft pick. And then you go back to the Green Bay game where he was actually benched. And he made the comment that at that time he began to think that his time in Philadelphia was limited, maybe even over. Now, the Philadelphia Eagles had just signed him to a $128 million contract the year before. You get benched in week 12 when you probably should have been benched in week 8. And your initial thought is that, hey, this might be the end for me. For me, that speaks to competition. What's your mindset, and why would you think that? I know that Doug Peterson said early on when everyone asked in week 7, week 8, week 9, week 10, hey, why aren't you making, a quarterback change here? And Doug Peterson's response was, quote, we're still in the playoff hunt. And because we're in the playoff hunt, if I make the change now, then that sends the message to the rest of the team that I'm giving up on the rest of the season. Now, I didn't agree with that then. I don't agree with that now. I think that quarterbacks, like all other players, go through periods where they struggle mightily, and sometimes a step back, being able to look at the forest, from the trees in order, to look at things from a different perspective, to see the game from a different perspective, to see another player play and hear those plays being called and look at why they're working and why they're not working and what you could possibly be doing right and what you could possibly be doing wrong. I think that that's the proper way to look at it. But Carson looked at it from the standpoint that, hey, my time in Philadelphia may be up. Okay, now when Nick Sirianni took over and Doug Peterson was fired, Nick Sirianni basically said, hey, every position is subject to competition. Certainly the way that Carson Wentz performed in 2020, you would expect, even in the limited amount of time that Jalen Hurts was able to play, you would expect the quarterback competition rolling in the training camp. Carson Wentz chose to bow out, to step away from, the situation and go into a situation where the starting job would just be handed to him rather than him having to compete for that starting job. That's problematic to me. Problem number one. Okay. Problem number two is that I still don't see a guy who is willing to admit fault. I don't see a guy who's willing to be accountable for as bad as he's played, because multiple questions were asked. And he seemed to dance around things. I mean, he's become very adept at doing that. He danced around the questions instead of just saying, hey, you know what? I had a bad year. I played bad. I accept responsibility. When you hear those types, when you don't hear those types of things from quarterbacks and players and coaches, that's almost, a telltale sign of a guy who's not going to change. You've got to admit that you've done something wrong. You've got to, accept responsibility. You've got to be accountable, as a quarterback, more so than any other position on the field. You've got to be the guy that steps up, even when it's not your fault sometimes, and take the bullet for your players that are around you, so that those guys will go to war and those guys will fight for you. I didn't see that from Carson Wentz. Early in that day, I think that there was a report out that the Philadelphia media was going to be blocked. Obviously, that wasn't totally the case. I think those questions needed to be asked. Those questions needed to be answered. I think Carson needs to approach things from a different perspective going into, his new role, because if he takes the same mindset, the same thought, the same way of doing things, over to the Indianapolis Colts from the Philadelphia Eagles, then the circumstances are going to be the same, because some adversity at some point is going to rear its head. Something's going to go wrong. Something's going to go amiss. He's going to struggle somewhere along the way next season. And how he deals with that will speak volumes for where that football team will head and how well they will do. Listen, I hope for a transformation and some growth from Carson Wentz when he tore his knee up in 2017. Sitting back watching how Nick Foles operated, how he took care of the football team, and how he galvanized the guys around him. I hope that Carson Wentz would watch that and learn something from that. And like any young player does when he's watching and being mentored, by a veteran, that he would grow from that. Suffice to say that never happened. And that's part of the reason why, in my opinion, that here we are today with our number 2 overall quarterback that was picked in the 2016 draft, I should say, that's no longer a part of this franchise and has left us with over $34 million in dead cap money. That is my thought on one Carson James Wentz. Next question here. Well, he wants to know, do you think the Eagles will draft a quarterback? I don't think so, but Howie might. Hey, listen, Howie has said that, they're a quarterback factory. So nothing is that far out of the realm of possibility when you talk about the Philadelphia Eagles and Howie Roseman. Now, they've made the commitment. Jeffrey Lurie, as the owner, has come out and said that he wants Jalen Hurts to be the number 1 guy without competition. Then, we get Joe Flacco signed to come in and be the backup. Could Howie and Jeffrey be playing, some games here from the standpoint that, you act like that you're going in one direction where, you're really going in another? That's not that far out of the realm of possibility. But if I'm running the draft, that's not the route I go. I know everyone's high on Jamar Chase. I know everyone's high on Kyle Pitts, and those seem like the surefire picks to go for. But I think that there's a little bit of depth in the wide receiver class. I think that we could get to trade back to 10 to 12 and pick up another draft pick, and at the same time be able to improve the wide receiver position if that's what you want to do. I'm a little leery about drafting another wide receiver. I mean, I don't think people realize that over the last 10 years, the last 10 drafts, the Philadelphia Eagles have drafted 11 wide receivers. Quite a few of those guys in the first round, albeit late, and quite a few in the second round. We can talk about talent. You can look at a guy and say, oh, we drafted this guy. The talent isn't there. He hasn't produced. He wasn't what we thought he was going to be. But I think also you have to look at the fact that we haven't developed a great wide receiver either. Now, you can't tell me that some of the guys that have been picked at wide receiver position don't have the talent. Granted, J-Jar was probably, our greatest mistake. Not taking Justin Jefferson last year was a big mistake. But all that I hear about Jalen Reagor and his competitiveness and his desire to get better, the jury is still out, and I will give him the benefit of the doubt because he was just a rookie last year. You can go all the way back to Jordan Matthews and say that maybe that draft pick was a reach by Howie Roseman. But the fact is that we've had some wide receivers drafted in high positions, yet underdeveloped or undeveloped. I mean, you look at Nelson Aguilar, struggled mightily his last year as a Philadelphia Eagle. And then all of a sudden he goes out to the LA Raiders, and John Gruden completely transformed this guy. 45 plus receptions, over 800 yards receiving, almost 18 yards per reception, and 8 touchdowns. But he was cast off from Philadelphia as a guy who couldn't play. I mean, that production and that year was great enough for him to secure himself a 2-year, $24 million deal now with the New England Patriots. And we know what the Patriots do with former Eagles players. They just coach them up and turn them into valuable assets. I don't expect anything less than that with, Nelson Aguilar and Jalen Mills. I think that Bill Belichick looks at him and sees a guy who is a utility knife, a guy who has a lot of, he's got a lot of skills in a lot of different ways. And what Bill is masterful at is looking at those skills and understanding how those skills fit some of the things that they do. Very diverse from the standpoint that, he could play safety or corner in the slot. So that means that guy has a lot of value. I wasn't high on him as a cornerback. I wanted to see him be a little more aggressive, as a tackler, at safety last year and more sure of a tackler. But I can guarantee you that's what he's going to be for the New England Patriots and Bill Belichick. Let's see what else we got. Emilio Rodriguez wants to know, Eagles need help in other areas than wide receivers. Hey, listen, absolutely. I think when you go, what were the Eagles, 4-11-1, I think that speaks volumes about where you are as an organization, where you are talent-wise. And listen, I get it. There are a lot of injuries that the Eagles had to deal with, over the last 3 years. But your team is only as good as the next backup at every single position. Now, we can talk about the injuries, but the games still go on. No team is going to feel sorry for the Philadelphia Eagles, or did feel sorry for them back when we talked about, the fact that, they were just inundated with all of these injuries. The games are going to go on Sunday night, on Monday, on Thursday, and then late in the seasons on Saturdays. And nobody really cares. So that's why as you build a roster, it's important that you have depth. It's important that, you got guys that you're developing along the way, because you're only going to be as good as your weakest link. So there are many, many positions. I think, they need an upgraded linebacker, whether we're talking draft or whether we're talking about signing free agents. You can never have enough cornerbacks. You create the competition there so that you get the best out of the position, because whoever it is that really wants to play, guess what they're going to do? They're going to compete their tails off. That's the beauty of competition in any sport, is that, the cream always rises to the top, and we're going to get the best player out there that's motivated, because, listen, they know that there's a guy behind them that wants playing time as well. On the offensive side of the ball, I think, we need to start thinking depth, and looking towards the future as far as the offensive line is concerned. And I'm not so sure what the Eagles are going to do with Zach Ertz. I kind of get the impression that they're waiting for the right package to come along, the right offer to come along. Maybe within the next 6 days, we might see something materialize. It's not beyond the scope of possibility that, he remains on the team. I mean, he is still 2 years under contract for the Philadelphia Eagles. And at the end of the day, they really control his rights. And, after last year and his play last year, he really didn't create a lot of value for himself. That's the problem when players don't play well and teams are in a position of wanting to move on from them, is that if they don't play well that last season, they have no value. They have no trade value. You saw it with Carson Wentz, in the minimal amount of draft capital we were able to secure, a second round with the potential to be a first round if he, meets the playing time percentages, and a third round this year. That for a guy who potentially is a franchise quarterback is not a lot in return when you consider that the Rams gave up, 2 first-round draft picks in order to get Matthew Stafford, a guy, who's been 10 years in the NFL. So there's a lot of positions to look at. I think that, they need to look at a veteran wide receiver to come in here and try to help and mentor some of these young wide receivers. You got a lot of youth across the board. There should be a lot of great competition there, but I still think, they need that veteran guy to be there, to be the voice for those young guys and carry those guys along. D-Jax moves on to the Rams. Everyone, kind of laughed at that and made a big deal about it, but I think for D-Jax, it's a great move. Going to be on a new training staff, to me, for him, that's the biggest thing, because for 2 years, he just couldn't stay healthy on a team that had been inundated with injuries. Some of that fault, some of that onus has to go on, the strength and conditioning staff, the training staff, because the level of injuries that incurred on this team over the last 2 years was just totally unacceptable. Every time you turn around, a major guy was being hurt. And even if he came back at a time, went through the process of just, getting healthy and getting back, he really didn't last long. So do I look at a situation where, D-Jax goes to the Rams? Maybe they don't use him as much. Maybe he only plays 60% of the plays. But listen, he can still run. And because he can run, you got a quarterback like Matthew Stafford who can air it out with accuracy. That's a huge, huge pickup for the LA Rams. But yes, Emilio, we definitely need to look at basically every position across the board and ask ourselves, where can we improve? What can we improve on? All right. So Craig wants to know, do I have any insights on the defensive schemes that Jonathan Gannon will run? Well, I know that they're pretty much, almost everybody now is a four-man front. You're basically a 4-2 unless personnel changes dictates, that you play nickel or dime, or you go with in its entirety, 4 downs and 7 defensive backs in obvious passing situations. The interesting thing is, from what I know, is they're a cover 3 team. They play some 3 match. They play a little bit of cover 2. I'm sure within the playbook, they have a little bit of some man coverage, but obviously you're not going to see as much. Not going to see as much man coverage under Gannon as you saw under Jim Schwartz last year. Jim Schwartz is primarily a man coverage type guy. Obviously, personnel kind of dictates in a lot of instances what type of coverage that you play. Because if you don't have the weapons, to match up across the board, then you've got problems that forces you into zone coverages. When you're playing against quarterbacks that are elite level quarterbacks, elite level thinkers, they're going to get a pre-snap read. They know where the holes are in the zone if you're not in zone matchup, and they can cause you some problems. But I would imagine, Craig, you're going to see quite a good mix of a bunch of different coverages, multiple coverages where you get in zone on one side, man on the other side, a little bit of just straight zone, a little bit of zone match. And, obviously, anytime that you bring pressure, you're pretty much in blitz coverage, which is just pure man-to-man with, single high safety. So, as much as things change, defensive football, what it is. There's so many coverages that you can run. Some teams live in man because they have the personnel to play more man. Most teams live in zone because they don't have the personnel to play man, and they get in man when they need to or as a key breaker. But I think in time we'll be able to, decipher and see, what kind of scheme it is that they run. Obviously, coming from the Indianapolis Colts, they had good linebackers. They had a good defensive front. They had good defensive ends and decent, corners on the outside. So that kind of dictates in a lot of instances exactly what you can and what you can't do from a coverage standpoint. Let's check in with Sean Brown. Sean wants to know, do you feel this coaching staff will value the run? The one thing that I do know is that, this has been a major point for Nick Sirianni. I mean, if you go back and you look at the Indianapolis Colts last year, they were a run-first team. And no matter how you want to look at it, what you want to talk about, I think at the end of the day, that's really, what it's all about. You can talk about throwing the ball all over the map. If you're an elite level quarterback, yes, you can do that. But when you've got a second-year quarterback who again is learning a new system for the second year in a row, a quarterback's best friend protection-wise is a running game and a solid offensive line. Now, if we can stay healthy, then the Philadelphia Eagles have a solid enough offensive line to get the job done. The other question is, can you run the ball with efficiency enough so that Jalen Hurts isn't taking the snap out of shotgun, standing back, 30, 40 times out of shotgun and trying to air the ball out rather than running the ball, establishing the run, creating misdirection plays and creating play action pass that buys him the extra second to actually go through his progression, and create a successful passing game. I get your worry. We've been going through this, with Doug Peterson for the last 5 years. They just never respected the run enough to allow it to help Carson Wentz be the quarterback they needed him to be. They wanted to put it all on his shoulders, and it was clear because of the injuries and the time missed that his development was arrested. And the best thing they could have done The same thing what you see with Stefanski did in Cleveland with Baker Mayfield. The previous regimes that came through, they tried to make Baker Mayfield the guy. There's nothing wrong with that, but let him grow into that. What Stefanski did this year is he came in and made the priority the running game. He had Nick Chubb, the other running back from Kansas City. He kind of leaves my memory at the moment. Kareem Hunt. So you got these two guys, two great running backs that you can lean on, that you can create a running game through, and then have your pass game operate off of that run game with play action and bootlegs and misdirections and things of that nature. And we saw a Baker Mayfield that we hadn't seen for the previous 2 or 3 years. To me, that's the formula. That's how you bring a young quarterback along. You just don't throw him into the fray and ask him to throw the ball 30, 40, 50 times in a game, and ask him to grow up like that, because defenses are just too good for that. Let's see. Let's go to Thomas Myers here. Do you think the Birds should draft or pick up a bigger running back to change the pace? I think that the Eagles staff believes, at least Doug Peterson's staff believe, and I think it's probably the mindset of, the training staff as well. And because of the injuries that Miles Sanders had dealt with over the last 2 years, it's not that far out of the realm of possibility that, it's true. I mean, when you look at Miles Sanders and you look at the percentage of plays that he played per game, he averaged right around 15 and 16 carries a game. Most people would say that's not enough. But when you look at his injury history over the last 2 years, there may be, some substance to that fact that, maybe you need a bigger back. Maybe not so much as a change of pace, but, when you just want to get downhill and you just want to, play smash mouth football, maybe you need that bigger back that can run it in between the tackles. They can get you 3 yards in a cloud of dust, every single time that you hand it to them. The question is where, at what position, at what pick, do the Eagles actually exercise that, or do they, look to one of these guys that are out there in free agency that continues to be there beyond the draft, that now puts them in a situation where you can get those guys for $2, maybe $3 million, on a 1-year deal. So to me, that's not necessarily, out of the realm of possibility. But listen, I think that Miles Sanders can be, the guy. I don't know about the bell cow. God, how I hate that term. But I think he can be the guy that, that could probably get 20 runs a game. And then you throw in maybe 5 to 6 catches a game. And then, you have the other guy that can come in and just, short yardage, goal line, the guy that just, really moves the pile and keeps the chains going, if you can get to a lead in the fourth quarter and you're into your 4-minute offense. Let's see. What else we got here? Let's go back to the bottom here. I thought I saw one here that I want to get to. All right, Jimmy, you're up. If we don't commit to the run, it's over. Hurts isn't accurate enough to win a game with his arm, in my opinion. Well, Jimmy, while I respect your thought, I wholeheartedly disagree. I think if you look at some of the plays that Jalen Hurts made last year, some of the big plays down the field, the ball to D-Jack against Dallas, the ball to Alshon on the back shoulder throw late in the year, I'm trying to think. I believe it was Greg Ward on the out route late in the year. I mean, all of these throws, you're talking there 30 yards or more down the field, perfectly placed balls, very accurate balls. I think that, when quarterbacks are under pressure, I mean, and let's be realistic. Jalen Hurts got thrown into an improbable and almost impossible situation. There are fans out there that believe that he can't be the guy. And my thing is, why not? What young quarterback? Did Carson Wentz come in year one? Did he just tear it up in year one? Absolutely not. The Eagles went 7-9 that year, with a great defense. They went 7-9 last year. That year, I should say. Jalen Hurts entered last year without the benefit of OTAs, without the benefit of preseason football games, and without a whole lot of, I would imagine, without a whole lot of snaps, as the main guy during training camp. So what was it that we expected for a guy picked 53rd overall to come in and accomplish? I think that we saw some glimmer of hope out of Jalen Hurts last year, and we saw some things that kind of made you scratch your head and wonder, okay? I think that, we can talk about inaccuracy. I think Carson Wentz over the last 2 years has been one of the most inaccurate quarterbacks in the NFL, I don't think his completion percentage was that much better over, a 12-game stint than Jalen Hurts' was over a 3.5, 4-game stint, So Jalen Hurts is the quarterback. Let's wait and see what he can do. Let's stop talking about what he can't do and what we don't believe he can do and how inaccurate he is and, he can't read defenses and he never goes through his progressions. Let's wait and see how this coaching staff develops Jalen Hurts. Let's see how Jalen Hurts moves from an improbable rookie year, to a second year, where he's going to have hopefully the benefit of OTAs, of learning a new system with time to grow in it, to find some kind of continuity, with these young wide receivers. I'm more apt to look at that than I am talk about what he can't do. And like I said before, the run game only benefits any quarterback. I don't care whether you're talking. Let's if you want to talk about it, and I'm not making a comparison. I'm only talking about it because of the relevancy of it. Tom Brady threw for 200 yards in the Super Bowl, 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. Okay. He won the MVP because of the hype of him, in my opinion, moving from New England to Tampa Bay and doing it the first year that he got there. Okay. That doesn't mean that Tom Brady isn't the GOAT. In my opinion, I think he's the greatest quarterback to ever play in the NFL. That's debatable. Okay. But what got them where they, to where they could be successful is that, they had a defense that stepped up and then was able to do some things against Patrick Mahomes that no other team in the NFL had been able to do over the last 3 years. Okay. 3 field goals against Patrick Mahomes, and I get it. They've got, backup tackles playing on both sides, but you still got Tyreek Hill. You still got Travis Kelce. You still had, Nicole Hartman. You still had, the running back, Edwards Hilaire. You still had all those pieces, okay? But they were able to do something that nobody else was able to do. And then when you really delve into what the offense looked like for Tampa Bay, if you go back and you look statistically at that game, okay, it was a game where they ran the football. I believe the run-to-pass ratio was right there, even maybe 35 runs and 35 passes, because that, even for the great Tom Brady, is the best ratio, the best method for him to be successful in the passing game. Because when you're running the game, it opens up the rest of your playbook. So, Jimmy, that formula works for, 95.5% of all quarterbacks in the NFL. There's only a handful of guys that don't need a run game, that they can throw those little screens out there and pick up 5 yards. They can, run bubble screens and back screens and things of that nature to keep defenses off balance. But 99.5% of the quarterbacks in the NFL would do better if offensive coordinators would have a run first mentality where they could just, dominate the line of scrimmage and then go play action pass, which would now give your quarterback an extra second to a second and a half to observe and decipher what's going on down the field and make the proper reads. Okay? That's my thought on that. Let's see. Where'd that question go? Lem Coulter. Got a little running back question, huh? What's your thoughts on Najee Harris and Travis Etienne? My goodness, you talking about two guys that I absolutely love. I thought that Najee Harris at the end of last year just elevated himself to the top of the list of running backs on the collegiate level. I've loved Travis Etienne for the last, 3 years, obviously. I love the way that he runs. He runs with a lot of aggression, great vision, and the ability to slide and find holes along the line of scrimmage when the designated hole just isn't there. He's not a great receiver out of the backfield, but he's got decent hands. I think that, with the right coach, he can improve upon his ability to catch the football. But Najee Harris, man, I mean, he was like a men playing among boys last year at the end of last year. And I just don't know. I don't know where he falls. I mean, I get the narrative about running backs in the NFL and you don't value them, in rounds 1, 2, and 3, that you can get good running backs anywhere. But I think that there are transformational guys that you can draft early that do it all. Because if you look at most rosters, you've got guys that are just running backs. You got guys, that are great third down backs. And you got guys, a few of those guys have the ability, to protect well. But when you look at these two guys, obviously Najee Harris is a better blocker than Travis Etienne. But I just love the way that both of these guys play. And I just think that, whatever team they wind up with, that team's getting a solid back. Even if, they're a back that's going to be in a 2-3 back rotation, these guys, especially Najee Harris, in my opinion, I think he's going to be really special at the next level. Let's see. Jeanette wants to know, will they have OTAs, training camps, and preseason? I don't think that the NFL even knows right now if that's a possibility. Obviously, you'd love to see that, especially for the Philadelphia Eagles, and the fact that, you got a new staff. You're going to have a lot of new young players on the roster, and the fact that, as a new staff, you get an extra practice session or mini camp because, of a new staff. I think right now the NFL is trying to figure that out. Do each team go into a bubble for a designated period of time rather than just, an OTA that, that encompasses, 3-4 days. Maybe you come in and you go through an OTA period, for 21 to 30 days nonstop. Now, I know that the union would fight that. The players probably wouldn't like that. But I think, for young guys, it's a major plus. And maybe you just do it, for the young guys. Maybe post-draft, you bring your young guys in, your draftees in, and you get to work with those guys, in a bubble for 2 weeks nonstop. I think it's invaluable. I think it hurt the NFL last year not having OTAs. I thought it hurt them not having true training camps and preseason games. And I thought it was really unfair for the young guys. They got drafted in the NFL last year, because how can you show your wear when you're limited as far as what you do in training camp to just a few padded practices and a few, sessions where you can actually hit and be physical. So a lot of guys were judged upon being on the roster or being cut, I don't know based upon what, because you had nothing to really look at. You had no proof of what a guy could be. That guy who was a diamond in the rough that no one ever thought about, he may have flashed in practice, but he didn't get an opportunity to flash in a preseason game where you could actually see it, judge it, and evaluate it. So I believe that, the NFL is trying to figure all of that out right now. But I think at the end of the day, it's vitally important, not only for the product that is, NFL football, but also for the development of the technique and the fundamentals of these young guys moving forward. A year loss, another OTA, another offseason loss, it just doesn't bode well, even for these second-year guys who were rookies last year. They need it. All right. So let's see. All right. So Jimmy Allen wants to know, can we move back to 10 or 13, get an extra pick, and still get Parsons? Listen, I watched Parsons. I was just watching his, some tape on him just the other day. He is an absolute beast. I'd be shocked if he's not gone by, the 10th overall pick. I think he's one of those transformational linebackers, like Devin Bush and Devin White for Tampa Bay. I think these guys, they change defenses. They change defenses because, they're the total package and all that they can do. They're pretty adept at covering backs and tight ends, man to man. They're really adept at dropping in the zone and not only keeping their eyes on the quarterback, but being able to read patterns and what's going on behind them. And at the same time, when you look at Parsons, my goodness, I mean, he is a phenomenal blitzer. I mean, he does some things at that position that very few linebackers have the ability to do. So no, I don't. If that's the pick, then they might as well stay at 6 and take him. They're certainly not going to get him if they trade back, between 10 and 13. I think he's gone by then. That's just, that's just my opinion. In my opinion, he's just that good. Let's see. Some of you guys must be talking to each other on here. Because I see that someone asked about Micah Parsons, and then the next thing you know, the last 5 questions have been about Micah Parsons. So, hey, listen, I'm relying on you guys as great questions, to do this, talk to them. So instead of talking to each other, you guys need to talk to me. Tell me what you want to talk about. Good one here by Jonathan Granger. So is the new coach having any input in the draft? I would certainly hope so. I think that Howie really needs to confer, and at some level, the head coach and the GM need to be on the same page as far as, draft picks are concerned. I just feel like, when you leave that guy out of the mix, and whether it be Howie by himself or Howie and his staff that's making the final decisions on who they're going to draft, it just doesn't bode well. I mean, because listen, if I'm a head coach and I sit down with my offensive coordinator and my defensive coordinator and I say, okay, this is the type of player I'm looking at every position on defense. This is the type of player I'm looking for at every position on the offensive side of the ball. Okay. I can explain that to a GM, but a GM doesn't coach. Howie has never been a coach. Okay. So to understand how and why that guy fits into your scheme is a completely different ballgame. Okay. So if Howie's not taking the advice of the head coach and the defensive coordinator and the offensive coordinator at face value and understanding what they really need, then I think it doesn't bode well for the Eagles and their ability to improve. So while I would say no, because, when you hear things like, how he's going to be making game day activations and deactivations, he's going to have complete control over the roster. To me, that just makes no sense, because as much of a football person as, how he wants to make himself out to be, you haven't been a coach. And when you haven't coached, it's hard for you to sit back and make these judgments about football personnel moves without understanding and knowing what these coaches need. And how fair is it to the coach? Because at the end of the day, his livelihood, his job is going to revolve around his ability to stack W's and get into the playoffs. Okay? So if Howie is the guy that's making the draft decisions and he's making the roster moves and he's making game day activations and deactivation moves, okay, how is it fair that you then get to fire the head coach when he doesn't perform, when it's you that's bringing the personnel, telling the coach who's playing and who's not playing, okay, and who makes the team and who doesn't make the team? I mean, how much sense does that make to you, me, or anyone else? Okay, as a head coach, do you really want that job that you're powerless and that when you fail, it's not totally on your merit, but because of the players that you were given to go to battle with, and you weren't given efficient tools to go to war with? So it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me when you really stop and think about it. So I hope on some level that that Jeffrey and Howie and Nick can come to a place where they all understand that, Howie and his staff and Nick and his coordinators need to have some kind of input as to, who they're drafting and where they're drafting and how they fit into the scheme of what, the offensive coordinator and the head coach really want to do. Michael Alexander wants to know, are we the worst drafting team in the league? And listen, some will say yes. I think, when you look at the record of players drafted over the last 5 years and how much success we've had, we've only drafted one, Pro Bowl player in quite some time. When you think about all of those things, one could say yes, but I'm not gonna put all the blame on Howie, because I still believe that it's, at some point, the coaches have to take this raw talent, these raw individuals at every position, and teach them beyond the X's and the O's. Okay, I can teach anybody the game of football from an X's and O's standpoint. Okay, but the difference is how do you give each player the tools, the skills, the fundamentals, the technique to get better year after year. Okay, as a coach, if you don't possess the ability to do that, then it's a disservice to your players, because your players, especially your young players, they can only get as good as the knowledge that a position coach possesses. Okay, so if I can teach a guy how to cover man to man, then that makes him a better linebacker. If I teach him eye discipline, what he's looking for pre-snap read, how to read the offensive lineman, how to understand patterns, if I can teach him, how to utilize those tools, then I can make him a better linebacker. Okay. The problem is, in the NFL, there's a lot of teams. It's been historic when you look at the defensive backfield of the Philadelphia Eagles, from Corey Sunderland right on up to, Marshawn last year and whoever the new guy is for this year. Okay. They're tasked with, how do I find the time? How do I have the resources to help my players get better? We should see incremental growth every single year, from the rookie year all the way up, I would say, to the fifth year. Because by the time you get to the third year, to the fifth year, taking in consideration injury and how much time a player actually gets on the field, by that time, you already know who and what he is. That's not going to change. He's hit his ceiling, and he's in where he is and what he's doing. He's pretty much arrived, so It's one thing to be a coach that hands out plays and installs defenses and can tell you from an X's and O's standpoint where you should be and when you should be there and what your responsibility is. It's a whole nother thing to show a player how to get there and how to get there on time and what angle to take and what to look at to help you get there and how to understand how to think through a game as it progresses. So yeah, we missed on quite a bit of draft picks, and one could say we're the worst drafting team in the NFL, but one can also add to that that the Philadelphia Eagles have not done a good job of developing talent at many different positions, and most of the players who had success on the Philadelphia Eagles, in my opinion, not all, because some of the coaches that they've had have been phenomenal. The O-line coach, Stoutland, is phenomenal. I mean, you look at what he did with Mailata, a guy who never played football, and in 3 years' time, he is, in my opinion, a starting left tackle in the NFL. So I'm not saying all of their coaches have been that way, but the majority of the coaches that the Eagles have had over time have not done a good job of, developing the players at their position. Deuce Staley, great developer of talent. Mr. O2, you know what? Trey Sermon, listen, he's a guy to add to, Harris and Etienne. There's no doubt about it. But the question is, someone asked me who was better of those two without, leaving Trey Sermon out. It was sad to see him get hurt, in the college football championship series, because he was another guy, that was just dominant, the last 3-4 games of the season. So I mean, he's another guy to look at, and I like his versatility. When you talk about the type of running backs that these three guys are, Trey is a guy that can be physical. He's a guy that can make you miss. Travis Etienne can make you miss a little bit, but he's a more physical runner. He's more apt to get beat up because of the aggressive style of running that he uses. Najee Harris is just a beast. I mean, he's got no speed to run away from you. He's got enough power to run you over. And from time to time, he can make you miss, and he's got great hands out of the backfield. But from a skill set across the board, as a runner, as a pass catcher, and as a blocker, I think I'm of the opinion that Trey Sermon may be the best of the lot there. And not sure where it is, in my opinion, where he falls in this draft. The crazy part is you don't get to talk a whole lot about running backs. Nobody really wants to talk about them because, these draft gurus have put out, this narrative that, you don't have to draft a running back or a linebacker in early rounds. I disagree. If that guy can be a difference maker for you, then you go and you get him. There's just no doubt about it. Let's see what else. I knew you guys want to talk purely Eagles today. I'm going to shift for a quick second. Let's talk about some things that's happening in the news. The inaugural HBC Combine is set for April 9th through the 10th. Listen, I love this. I love the fact that some of these, smaller market schools, these historically Black colleges, of which we've had some great players to come out of. You got Walter Payton, arguably the greatest running back ever, who is, pretty much came from an HBC. Harold Carmichael came from an HBC. Donnie Shell. I mean, the list just goes on and on. Doug Williams, Super Bowl winning quarterback. And a lot of these guys don't get the invitation to go to the combine and put their skill sets on display. So this is a great opportunity, for them to put some, to have their metrics, out there for everyone to see so that you have something to measure them against as far as all the rest of the other players around the country are concerned, because everybody knows what you're getting out of Alabama, what you're getting out of Clemson, what you're getting out of, the top schools around the nation. But there's a lot of good football players that play at these HBCU teams that don't get a fair look, a fair shot. Deshaun Watson seems like, he's just got a world of trouble at his feet. Listen, I don't know what a lot of you guys think. At the end of the day, he's got to go through the process. I find it kind of funny that, all of a sudden, all of this comes out at a time where he's really, demanding that there's no way that he's coming back to Houston. So I guess, the conversation has to be had. The thought has to be broached. Is this something, that the Houston Texans would stoop so low to do to the value of their quarterback in order to keep him, to deter other teams from actively looking at him and asking, is this a guy that we really want to spend draft capital on to trade for? I'm not exonerating him. I'm not condemning it either. I just find it difficult to believe and hard when you think about, and this is the tough part, guys. I used to argue all the time with my good friend Charles Barkley, because Charles used to always say that, hey, I'm not a role model. And I said, Charles, what do you mean you're not a role model? There are young people out there looking up to you all the time. The funny thing is, when I have my son, I begin to look at it from a different perspective, because I am my son's model to role. I don't know any player out there personally, in any sport personally, that I would say, hey, I want that guy. I want my son to look at him as a role model. I don't mind my son looking at those guys and admiring who they are, okay? But how I live every day and how I live my life and what my values and what my morals are all about, that is the role that I'm modeling for my son, okay? So when you talk about, the first thing that people want to talk about when a professional athlete gets in trouble is that, he's a bad role model. Well, it's a parent's job to be their kid's role model. It's not a professional athlete that they don't know what they come from or who they are or what their beliefs are. It's not their job to be a role model for your kid. It's your job as a parent to be a role model. What you want them to become, that's what you should show them that you are, so that that's what they will become. Not Michael Jordan, not Wayne Gretzky, not Mike Smith, not anybody else that's in, not any of them, not Charles Barkley or anybody else. So that's my take on that. It just pains me to see what this kid is going through right now. It's tough, but we shall see how it all pans out. Well, this week is we're doing our giveaway, the Seth Joyner autographed ball with a Seth Joyner autographed mini helmet. To enter, I will post instructions on social media for what you guys could do over on Facebook, over on Instagram, and on Twitter. But essentially what we want you guys to do is to refer 3 people in that post that we put up. Today is Tuesday, the 23rd. On Friday or Saturday, we will post on social media, probably via Instagram. So that would require you to go over and follow me over at Instagram at Seth Joyner Show, on Twitter at Seth Joyner, on Facebook at Seth Joyner, and over on the Seth Joyner Show on Facebook as well. Excuse me. And please go over to the Seth Joyner Show on YouTube and subscribe there. If you want to leave comments there, if you want to refer your 3, friends to the Seth Joyner Show, we'll be pulling from all of those different social media platforms, and we will announce our winner either Friday evening or Saturday afternoon. All right. Well, that's our time. That is the Seth Joyner Show. It's been my pleasure to answer your questions and hang out and chat with you guys today. I will see you guys right back here next week for another edition. We'll have a guest on with me next week as we begin to gear up and move towards the draft. By next week's show, we'll be 2 days removed from finding out who the Philadelphia Eagles, or if the Philadelphia Eagles will draft at the number 6 position, and what the other 31 teams are doing, and the movement and the trades and everything. We'll begin to talk about that on next Tuesday's show. Well, as always, I tell you guys to be kind to each other, be good to each other, and take care of each other. But most importantly, make sure that you love each other. I'll see you guys next week. Thank you for tuning in to the Seth Joyner Show. Peace.